So good morning to journalists here in Geneva. Good afternoon to those of you who are joining us from Bangladesh and the region. This has been an exceptionally important endeavor. On 14 August last year, Dr. Mohammed Yunus, the chief advisor of the interim government of Bangladesh, asked me to deploy a team to conduct an independent and impartial fact-finding into the human rights violations and abuses that took place between 1 July and 15 August of last year. I want to emphasize the importance of that invitation by Dr. Yunus. My team received overall good cooperation from the authorities, access to current and former senior officials, and we also had access to a lot of important official information. I would also like to express my deep gratitude to the many victims and their families, survivors, witnesses, medical professionals and other experts, national and international civil society organizations who engaged with and assisted our team. Among our key findings, there are reasonable grounds to believe that officials of the former government, its security and intelligence apparatus, together with violent elements associated with the former ruling party, committed serious and systematic human rights violations. These include hundreds of extrajudicial killings, extensive arbitrary arrest and detention, and torture and ill treatment, including of children, as well as gender-based violence. These violations were carried out with the knowledge, coordination, and direction of the former political leadership and senior security officials, with the specific goal of suppressing the protests and keep the former government's grip on power. Women and girls were at the forefront of the early protests, and our report details they were specifically subjected to gender-based violence by security forces and Awami League supporters. There are reasonable grounds to believe that certain crimes against humanity have been committed, directed against protesters and their supporters. We also documented serious acts of revenge that private individuals committed against supporters of the former ruling party, police officers, and in some cases people belonging to minority and distinct religious groups in the immediate aftermath of the protests. Efforts to ensure accountability have begun, with many cases being lodged, including before Bangladesh's domestic International Crimes Tribunal. There are major challenges and deficiencies in the current legal system, and significant steps need to be undertaken to ensure compliance with international standards of due process and fair trial. My office is available to advise and support the government in addressing these issues. There are also accountability avenues at the international level that can be considered, such as universal jurisdiction, as well as a referral by Bangladesh of this situation to the International Criminal Court. For violations of this gravity and magnitude, however, much more will need to be done than criminal trials. What is needed is a comprehensive process of truth-telling, reparation, memorialization, and reform as the path to national healing, and my hope is that this report will contribute to that. Thousands of people, including children, have suffered life-altering injuries. Resources will be needed to implement victim-centered reparation programs and provide compensation, long-term medical treatment, rehabilitation care, and livelihood opportunities for victims. It is just as important that Bangladesh institutes profound reforms so that such serious violations will never occur again, and that the repressive laws and institutions underpinning them are dismantled or completely overhauled. When I visited Bangladesh last October, I was deeply moved by my meetings with student leaders, with civil society actors and officials who were working hard to build on the momentum to implement a new vision for Bangladesh, one with human rights and social justice at its core. The recommendations in this report are made in the spirit of contributing to the implementation of such a vision, and my office is available to continue and further expand our cooperation with Bangladesh, including through a strengthened presence in the country. In recent decades, Bangladesh's promise has too often been marred by bitter feuding and patronage and identity politics. Today, this transition offers a chance to step back from cycles of revenge and move towards a new approach that brings the nation together in a spirit of trust building and healing. Advancing accountability and human rights will be fundamental to achieving that transformation and change. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner. We will now take questions. I'd like to invite the Bangladeshi journalists who are online. If you raise your hands, then we can take questions from you. I don't see any raised at this stage well, actually we do. We've got one hand. I'd rather we take 3 questions at a time. Maybe we might actually, we'll take the first question online from Jamuna TV. If you could please identify yourself. Then we now actually have a second question from Mehdi Hassan. So if we do those first 2 questions, please.
Excellency, thank you. My name is Mahfouz Mishu. I work for Jamuna TV. It's a 24/7 news channel based in Dhaka. My question is to High Commissioner. My question is about the legal process. You know, you have identified the problems, and ex-Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and her then Home Minister Asaduzzaman Khan Kamal as one of the planner, and they were directed to the law enforcing agency to killing these 1,400 people. So both of them are out of country. So will you be able to help Bangladesh government to bring back them in Bangladesh and face them the judicial process?
Thank you. And the next question from Mahedi.
Hello, this is Mehdi Hassan Maruf. I am with the Netro News. According to the UN fact-finding report, Naid Islam, now an advisor in the interim government, he was abducted and taken to DGFI, the military intelligence, their Ainagar detention center on the 19th July last year. Could you please elaborate on the details of this abduction? Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll take one more online from the Bangladeshi media. Israt from DBC News. Israt from DBC News. Okay, maybe we're having I think he's online. Israt? Okay, we might move on to the next one. I think he might be having some comms problems. So this one is from Kamaruzam.
Yes.
Kamaruzam,
do you hear me?
If you could identify the news organisation you work for, please.
Yes, I'm Kamruzzaman. I'm working for TRT World, Bangladesh correspondent, Turkish television channel. Actually, you know that Sheikh Hasina, along with other top cabinet members, most of them are now in India, and Bangladesh is conducting the judicial process against the human rights violation and genocide charges, especially during the July student movement. But India, Sheikh Hasina was the #1 ally of India, according to media statement and assessment. And now India is very rigid not to return Sheikh Hasina or other high officials. So Do you think that in this situation, without the cooperation of India, the fair judicial process can be conducted by Bangladesh?
Thank you. Over to you, High Commissioner.
Well, thank you very much. I think when it comes to the first question, it is important, and that is really goes to the heart of what the report is talking about. It is about accountability. When serious, grave violations of international human rights law, of abuses of this kind are being committed, as this report documents, it is crucial that indeed accountability is served. It's also a response to the survivors and the victims and the people that my office was able to interview on the ground. We have a domestic system, and that domestic system is in need of reform. And that's what is happening as we speak. And I had a chance when I was in Bangladesh to discuss this both with the interim government but also with the different heads of the reform process that were being undertaken. And indeed, we need to ensure that there is fair trial standards, there's due process guarantees. And this reform is ongoing and is one that we need to support as much as we can from the international community side as well. There is also the issue of making sure that when people, for example, who have committed serious crimes are outside the country, universal jurisdiction can work. In those countries where universal jurisdiction for grave violations of international human rights law is possible, then that can also be a part of the accountability process. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the possibility of a referral by Bangladesh to the International Criminal Court, because Bangladesh is a state party to the Rome Statute. Now, this is one thing. The other thing is truth-telling. My report directly contributes to that because it establishes the fact it's done by an independent, we don't have any stakes in the matter. What my team has done on the ground is precisely to establish the facts, to look at what happened, to interview, to look at an enormous amount of material, and to bring forward these facts and the application of the law. And that is in and of itself important because it is part of the truth-telling process. But beyond that, we also need memorialization. We need a deep healing for those who are directly affected, but for the country as a whole. And I just hope that the current reform process of the government, of the interim government, is an important contribution to this, because we hope that this new vision of Bangladesh can be given birth to, and with human rights at the center of it. On the second, there was a particular case mentioned, Nahid Islam. In fact, we have documented this case. If you read the report, we have this case documented as one of the emblematic cases of arbitrary detention, of which, as you know, there were many findings in that regard. And again, we can learn from it, and we have indeed made sure that these cases, the way that they are documented, provide the type of response that everyone expects. Look, as I mentioned before, on the judicial process, it is important, again, that the judicial process inside the country is reformed, that it guarantees due process, that it guarantees fair trials, and that process goes ahead, because we cannot allow for perpetrators of serious human rights violations to get away with impunity. They need to be held to account, and that's part indeed of the work that is being undertaken. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we'll take a couple of questions in the room to start with. First, AFP.
Yeah, thank you. Nina Larson, AFP. So I was wondering if I had a couple of small questions. I was wondering if you could say what your report found in terms of Sheikh Hasina's direct responsibility. If you're calling for international justice in this matter? I know you said it's impossible, it's important that there is the possibility, but do you think it's that it would be good that this does go to universal jurisdiction or to other forms of international justice? And finally, sorry, on the reforms that you're talking about, are you concerned that the abuses that you've found in your report are continuing due to, I guess, embedded problems in the system? There was a report out today about 12 people who have died since the end of the revolution in custody. So I just wondering if you had some comments on that. Thank you.
We'll take another question in the room. Thanks.
Yeah, Laurent Siro, Swiss News Agency. Thanks, High Commissioner. Follow up on the last question. There's been in the last days a wave of arrests, more than 1,300 arrests. You mentioned that there is a need to set back of the cycle of revenge, so your comments on that. And then on your call for truth-telling, what's the first reaction of the new government? Are they heading towards a format like a truth commission? Thank you.
Thank you. If we have no more questions in the room, I think we'll take one more online from Shahidul Islam. Sorry, I'll come to you next. Shahidul?
Yes, it is Shahidul Islam Chaudhry from Rajkir Patrika in Bangladesh. The Commissioner has mentioned about the ICT process in Bangladesh. At the same time, the international avenues for ensuring justice through ICC. Should Bangladesh complete first the ICT process at home before going to the ICC process for international trial? Thank you.
And we'll take one more question. We've got one in the room, and this will have to be the last one for the High Commissioner. Thank you.
Hi there, Olivia from Reuters. Thank you very much for this briefing. Could you just give a couple of examples, just to add a bit of detail about the types of things that you found in your report in terms of these human rights violations? You gave some helpful broad details, but a couple of examples of some of the worst examples would be helpful. Thank you.
So just on the first question, I think it's clear when you read the report that my office's findings found reasonable grounds to believe that indeed the top echelons of the previous government were aware and in fact were involved in the commission of very serious violations of for instance, enforced disappearances, arbitrary detention, the suppression of the protests through violence. And what it means as well is, these are findings, and there's a certain standard that we use when it comes to human rights inquiries. It's quite another standard when it comes to trial, and that's a different standard that needs to be applied, and that's why we are saying if it leads to trials, further, obviously, criminal investigations are required and warranted, because human rights inquiries do not in and of itself establish criminal guilt. This is indeed for a court of law to decide, but it gives a very strong indication where our findings have gone. The reform process, it's, as always, in a transition, fragile. It's not easy. I saw this myself when I went last year to visit Bangladesh. But I was impressed by the thoroughness, by the seriousness, and by the commitment of the interim government and the chief advisor, but also by the people who are leading these reform processes, how deep they want to go into making sure that some of the systemic structural changes that they are overcome. Is it easy? No, it's not. It's a complex process, that's clear. And the commitments from the government, even recent announcement by the chief advisor, for example, were also very clear about not repeating the patterns of the past, these revenge killings, the identity politics, the patronage, and these cycles of revenge. And that is a very strong commitment. Do things happen that shouldn't happen? Yes, they do. And as a result, they need to be investigated. We, my office only looked at a very specific time frame, which was July, mid-August, so it was already when the new interim government took office. It is important that we learn, that the country learns from this. Our contribution is precisely to offer these facts, but it is also important that each and every incident that happened ever since is properly investigated. And again, my office can provide an independent source of information because we have no stakes in the matter. And that's the advantage of independent human rights inquiries, and also help build up a system, a domestic system, a national human rights institution that is fully independent. All the disappearances commission that is also being established, that is part of human rights work that can overcome the past and can ensure that we don't fall back, that a country doesn't fall, or a society doesn't fall back into old cycles of trauma and revenge and violence. So the truth-telling process that's why the truth-telling process is so important, and the truth-telling process is for everyone. It's for each and every part, every segment of the society. As you could see also in the report, we wanted to point the direction, building also on experiences from other countries, that indeed you need to embrace the truth and you need to embrace the facts, and you deal with it through the application of the law. When it comes to the referral, the possible referral, since Bangladesh is a state party to the Rome Statute, again, one of the principles of that is complementariness. And you will have seen this in the whole working of the International Criminal Court. It's when you are indeed faced with a situation that some cases are either so difficult to prosecute and to handle, it's better to refer it to the International Criminal Court. That's a consideration for the government of Bangladesh. And it also shows the value of the international criminal justice system. And let's not forget that it has come under assault in recent weeks, and it is important to show how important that international criminal justice system is for the world. For countries that are particularly affected, such as what we are discussing here, but we have had similar discussions. We had a special session on the Democratic Republic of Congo last week, where again, similar considerations apply, but it shows the value of the international criminal justice system. So the complementarity is critical. Look at the findings. It's a very brutal read, and you have seen some of the worst examples. Obviously, the killings. 78% of the 1,400 people who we know have been killed, there may be more, was by firing military rifles, shotguns with pellets. You have seen in the report we have made a very strong plea that shotguns with pellets are forbidden because the injuries that they produce are horrific. And I saw that myself. I went to one of the hospitals in Bangladesh when I visited, and I could talk to some of the survivors, and some of them will be disabled for their lives. And that's especially young people. Some of them were children that I saw. Some of them were young women, young men, and these type of injuries are horrific. And we know that about 12 to 13% of children were affected by this. We had also journalists being killed, at least 6 from what I hear from the report, more than 200 injured. Mass arrests, the climate of fear that you may disappear, that you may not be found again, is extremely traumatic. And that was part of the repressive measures that applied. And again, this tells us the story that we have to bring these situations to light, and we need to put the spotlight on them, especially when we are able to establish the facts, and we need to learn from them, not just for the situation in Bangladesh, but for many other situations around the world where similar systems of repression are working. Okay, thank you very much.